Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Denes Boros, and today I want to show you how Magnus Carlsen reached his potential through his prodigy years. His first game was played in Vikings, or as you might know it these days, the Tata Steel tournament. Here he's facing off against his big-time rival in that event, Shipke Ernst, who was playing none other than the well-established system of the Carlsen. Very solid system and not a bad choice against an upcoming and rising talent such as Magnus. But as you shall see, Carlsen knows what he's doing. d4, d5, knight c3, de, knight e4, bishop f5. One of the main lines even to this day, even though Karpov did introduce knight d7 against Kamsky some time ago in the 90s. But back to bishop f5, this is the main line. Knight g3, bishop g6, h4. So white is trying to push black back while also trying to take over the e5 square. h6, knight f3, trying to get the knight there, knight d7, h5, bishop d3. Notice that white is trying to clamp down black and potentially create a target on g7. Takes, queen takes d3, e6, bishop f4, knight f6, long castles, bishop e7, knight e4, and queen a5. Now, these days, this move is not much in fashion. Castles been a big move. Although, if you follow the pattern of those days, which was 2003, 2004, this game has been played in 2004, but famously enough, one of the games played in 2003 was between the legendary female Grandmaster top 10 player, Judith Polgar, playing king b1, queen a5, after knight f6, g4, which is quite an astounding way of playing, but very much in the spirit of Judith Polgar's way of attacking chess. This was all the rage. This was the game between Judith Polgar and Anand. Now knight takes g4, rook g1. Here Anand played queen f5, but knight f2 would lead into very dicey waters. And after bishop f6, that would even lose to queen h6 as there is no defense against that. And a queen e1 check runs it to knight takes e1, and this pin is retained. So that is an important side note, so you know that at that time, so 2003, g4 was all the rage. Everybody expected g4 sacrifices and a wild game to commence. But in this game, Carlsen comes up with a different concept. Queen a5. So here, Shipke actually avoids that. King b1, castles, knight takes, knight takes. In fact, knight e5 is a different move played by Carlsen with a completely different idea. Rook d8, queen e2. Seemingly very humble, doesn't look like white is planning to go for g4, g5. Black unsuspectingly goes for c5, but here comes the hammer blow with knight g6, which is a beautiful sacrifice. If black ignores it, knight takes c7, d takes c5, and because of the extra space, note that white gained lots of space with h4, h5, and the bishop, white has an enduring advantage. So black, noticing that would be trouble, takes the piece. Queen takes e6. Now king h8 was played, rook f7 would run into h takes g6, and black is going to lose the material, and white will also have some attacking chances on the king side. So king h8 was played, and the big move here is h takes. Apart from knight g6, this is the second big move by Magnus. Obviously, he cannot take on e7 because of knight d5, and the queen and the bishop would hang at the same time, and black would be the one actually winning. H takes g6. So what does this make this such a great move? Well, A, it opens up the file for the rook. B, it kind of prepares sacrifices on h6. Why does this work? Well, it mostly works because black has a queen far away from the defenses, and the c-pawn is sort of blinding it and doesn't have enough time to join the battle and the fray when it was needed. So Shipke finds this very nice move of knight g8 defending both the bishop and the pawn. But unfortunately for him, Magnus came prepared and he knows what he's doing. Bishop takes h6, just demolishing this defense. Gh, rook takes h6. And as I mentioned before, the absence of that queen will be felt. Now king g7 would run into mate n1. There's no way out of this little box. Knight takes h6 has to be played, queen e7, and if the queen could be closer to the g7 square, there would be hope for survival. But in this case, there is not much you can do about queen h7 except from giving up the knight. G takes f7, king g7, rook d3. And again, the unfortunate placement. Queen e1 is almost checkmate, but the queen defends back, and apart from that, black is one move short of getting the queen over to the other side just to put some defenses up. Rook d6, nice trick. You could always lose a game even if you're winning. Back rank would show up and you are lost. It's checkmate. But Magnus isn't gonna fall for some cheap trick like that. Rook g6 check. Queen e5 check, very precise. If white doesn't play precisely, it's still easy to lose. But after queen f5 check, this is completely losing. It's after rook f6. There is this beautiful mate. And this was actually the first big win for Magnus, which led to his victory in the C group of the Tata Steel event, which is very important as this clinched his first GM norm. Now, if you're unfamiliar with chess, you have to achieve 3 of those norms, meaning 3-1 tournament and the reaching of the 2500 level. So this was the first game I wanted to show. As you could have seen, white was going all in with the attack, came up with a novel concept, and finished off the attack perfectly. The second game I want to show is between Carlsen and Dolmatov, played in Russia. So in this game, instead of playing e4, he played knight f3, which was a staple of his coach and now coach Peter Heine Nielsen. His opponent played f5, which is a little suspicious here. Now, interestingly enough, white can already think about sacrificing the pawn with e4, which is called the Lisitsyn gambit. If black takes, knight g5, knight f6, d3 takes, bishop d3, and the bishop actually puts a lot of pressure on that pawn, not to mention that eventually that king can get into trouble. This is a very interesting variation that can be played as white. However, interestingly enough, this move d3 was sort of devised by Carlsen's coach Peter Heine Nielsen, and I did see him actually play in a crucial blitz match versus Vaganyan. d3, and to that note, he actually won that game. d6, e4, e5, knight c3, knight c6. So all seems very natural. However, black is neglecting one thing, that is development. Black should be even going for the castles, and Magnus actually spots that immediately and goes for e takes f5. E takes f5 by normal standards is not a good move. You do not want to release the tension. However, this is more intended to open up the position as black's king is still in the middle. Bishop f5, d4. And that again looks a little strange. However, Magnus knows what he's doing. If he can get his pieces up on the e-file in due time, he is going to have a decisive attack. Only thing he needs to do is to be quicker than black could castle. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, e takes, queen takes d4, bishop c4. Another very, very good move. White is stopping that castling from happening, even if it would cost a pawn. Now black decides to avoid that and go for this build of b7, c6, d5 pawn structure. Now if black would take on c2, then white could castle, bishop e7, rook e1, immediately pressing on that king, and if c6, bishop g5, and you can already feel the pressure on the e-file. And after king f8, white is just in time to double up on the e-file with decisive threats, as that bishop is about to get captured with a big attack for Magnus Carlsen. So Black decided to go and play c6 instead, try to build a wall. Bishop g5, and this is actually the other way that you need to learn. Whenever you're going for an aggressive play, it is much better to go long castles than short, because that also brings your rook in the game. Now Black played b5, realizing that there will be trouble if he plays d5, but if d5 would have been played, Black obviously would have faced long castles, d takes c4, queen e5 check, opening up the file for the rook. If bishop e7, obviously, rook takes d8 wins the queen. And if queen e7, then just queen takes f5. And once these rooks arrive on the e and d files, Black will face a terrible, terrible attack that is most likely decisive. So Black goes b5 instead, trying to undermine that bishop. But of course, Carlsen insists on having that bishop there, because that would stop this king from castling. Bishop e7, on castles, queen d7, rook e1. And this is actually one of those things that shows how talented and great Carlsen is. He looks for the most active move and develops his pieces as much as possible. Even though Black would be alright based on the material, Black doesn't have a pawn down or any other disadvantages, only issue is the king in the center. Now, if Black would have tried to long castle, Magnus wouldn't have hesitated to open it up with a4 and put pressure on this structure. ba, bishop a4, pressing on that pawn, rook e8. But then here we would see rook e3, a very strong move, preparing this idea. After bishop f6, gf, knight d5, the spin allows this very nice knight jump. You can't take, because then you'd lose the queen. And in any other cases, this rook maneuver to b3 and c3 will prove to be too much for Black to handle. So Black, realizing that he's in big danger, decided to go king d8. However, unbeknownst to him, this was a big mistake. Now, sometimes drastic measures are needed in chess. You'd think that you have a great position, but you have to transform that advantage to a material advantage. White right now doesn't have anything more apart from the development advantage. White has all of his pieces developed, Black has barely any. So here, Magnus tried his luck and took on e7. Why is this such a great move? Well, A, it gets rid of one of the key defenders of Dolmatov's, and B, it also undermines these C and D pawns. Queen takes e7 followed. Now, if king takes e7, then there's queen f4. And there will be very, very big attacks going on in this position. If bishop g6 takes, rook e1, king d8, check, and rook e7. And there are many, many ways of breaking through, but already White has the winning advantage, as he will be up a queen plus a knight. Now Black decided to go queen takes e7, but then here comes queen f4, setting up this attack on the d pawn and the bishop and knight. Bishop e7, trying to cover the situation, knight e4, pressing on those pieces. d5, knight takes f6. Now Black couldn't take here because that would pin and win the queen on e7. So Black played h6, bishop h4, g5, queen d4, and it might seem surprising that Black resigned here, but there's a very simple explanation. After gh, knight takes d5, Black will have to face the choice, the unenviable choice of either losing the rook on h8, if c takes, there's queen takes h8 and too much material is hanging, or if Black goes queen e8, then knight f6, and White is going to win yet another piece, and there is no reason to continue on. So, if you have wondered why Carlsen was such a big prodigy, well, he had a feel for attack and quick piece development. In both of these games, he made big use of misplaced pieces in Ernst's game, in the Karakum game, in the first one, and in the Dolmatov game, he realized that his opponent forgot to castle in due time, and punishment came early on move 20. So I really hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if you enjoyed it, please like or subscribe. See you next time, and bye-bye.